Get 6 months of local news for just $2. You get unlimited access to the news and information you need to stay connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to get 6 months of local news for just $2.
You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay, I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right? Welcome to Plain Talk, where we are going to be talking about court records. And I think people who are familiar with my work know that I'm definitely on the criminal justice reform side of the debate. Some of my, at times, public fights with our attorney general over things like truth in sentencing and things. I'm very much on the criminal defense side of things, in that I am very skeptical of the power of the government. I think a lot of times the deck is stacked against folks who are accused of crimes in the criminal justice system. And I think people who really did commit crimes and are committed of them, sometimes most of them get out of jail again, and we don't exactly set them up for failure. So when we're talking about somebody like Adam Martin from the F5 Project, Adam and I agree most of the time on these issues. But an area where we don't agree is on House Bill 1166. Now, what the legislation does is it requires judges to seal the record starting on August 1st, 2025. All court proceedings that do not result in a conviction. So maybe the charges are dismissed, maybe the person is acquitted. They get sealed after 61 days. And also people who had criminal cases before that August 1st, 2025 start date, they can now petition the courts. And as long as their petition meets the requirements of the law, then judges are required to seal those records as well. Now, my argument against this is that, obviously I'm a member of the news media, and because so much of my attitude about the criminal justice system is lodged in skepticism of the government, I don't like it when these records are shut down. Now, I understand the argument in favor of the legislation, I completely understand, and I'm sympathetic to, which is that sometimes somebody who gets accused of a crime, whether they're acquitted or the charges are dismissed, it's still held against them. Sealing these records is a way to live up to that standard that we're all supposed to live up to, which is that you're innocent until proven guilty. My problem is that sometimes dismissals can happen because of things like corruption. One of the reasons why the public's business is done in public in the criminal justice system, is in many other ways of government, is that, we need to make sure that the process is a fair one, and not just fair to the criminal defendant, but also fair to the people. Were charges dismissed because the defendant was some powerful person's brother-in-law? What if there's a problem with the case and we don't figure it out until more than that 61-day window has passed? These are the things that came to mind. Now, I wrote about this in a column. Adam responded to me on Facebook, and he disagreed with me, and we wanted to bring him on and have a nice debate with our good friend Adam Martin. Adam, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Well, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate this.
Yeah. Now, describe for me all the ways in which I am wrong about this.
Oh, take your time on this one, Adam.
Right. Like I said in the comment, it's not that I think you're wrong. I think you have a good point. I just think that it's one of those areas that maybe we need to go back to legislation and create something specific to what you're talking about. Because I think that the weight of the people who are not necessarily benefiting, like you said, that we want to know if a legislator or elected official or whatever, if they're going through in some good old boy kind of network and they get let loose or whatever. I think for every one of those, there's 500 people, right, that are struggling with getting jobs or housing or whatever for something that they didn't even do. You know, maybe it's not widely known, but there is a practice in the courts where prosecutors stack charges. Right? So when they if they feel like they might have done something wrong in this area, they'll also add that felony onto that to pursue them. So then when they get to the plea bargain area and you're looking at 4 felonies, you're probably only really guilty of one of them or maybe 2 or something like that, but they'll come at you and say, "If you plead guilty today, we'll charge you out on 1 felony and drop 3." Well, what happens is that goes to court records, and now it looks like a person's a 4-time felon, even though that those charges have been dismissed, unless you know how to navigate through the court system kind of network or whatever. People look like they are a 4-time felon when they may have only been 1, and it probably wasn't even that heinous of a crime. That happens all the time. So that when I say for every one that you're talking about, there's 500. There's practices that are happening, or someone's wrongfully accused. So this opens up the door for you could just make an accusation at anyone, and if they decide to pursue it or whatever, it's a court record, and you're completely found not guilty, and now it's open records, and you look like a felon. You know what I
So,
mean?
Adam, how does this affect mugshots? I mean, I'm often frustrated that you'll see a mugshot on the front page of the paper, and then the person gets acquitted, and it's on section, C of the newspaper, and nobody's talking about it. But if I'm looking at hiring that person, I Google, and the first thing I see is a mugshot, and there's nothing to say that there were like, what does this law do for mugshots? Anything?
No, this is just courts. So, Rob still has, if you wanted to do a report on someone who's been charged with a crime, even if it's been dismissed, it's too late. It's in the form, it's in its digital footprint, right? That lives forever. So even if this stuff gets dismissed and that record's sealed, it's still on the internet. You can still do a Google search on a politician and see that he was doing some dumb crap, right? And some corruption or whatever. And it may not be on court records or whatever, but the forum definitely made sure that it stays on the internet forever. So mugshot reform, we tried to do that a few years ago, and it almost passed. It lost by like 3-4 votes. My issue with the mugshots is that back in the day when it was just we had wanted posters, right? There's a huge difference between wanted posters and booking photos, right? Wanted posters back in the day is like, we're looking for someone who's at large, who skipped out of town, whatever. He's a danger to society. Let's post his mugshot everywhere so that we can find this person. And that's probably 1 out of 50 mugshots that get posted now. Now mugshots just get posted because someone didn't pay their child support and they went to jail.
Well, there's an industry too of websites that scrape the mugshots from public records, and they publish them online, so that if anybody does a search for your name, they'll find your mugshot, and then you can pay them to take that down. Now, I think that's been made illegal in some states, but that's something that has been going on. And I struggle too as a member of the news media with the mugshot thing. In fact, I think I wrote a column about a gentleman in Cass County who had been arrested for killing another man. And his mugshot, where his hair is disheveled and he's wearing the orange jumpsuit, not a flattering photo, gets splashed all over the place. But then the charges get dismissed because he was defending himself. The person he shot was drunk and had attacked him and had pinned him up against a car. He lawfully defended himself, and he wasn't a criminal. But now his mugshot is out there forever. So I struggle with that as a member of the news media. But something I have a problem with this is that 61-day window. Yeah, if we report on it at the time, then sure, we can put that in the public record, and that can be out there for all time. The problem is that
you can definitely do it in time, Rob.
Okay, but the problem is that sometimes we might not know. We don't report on most of the criminal cases that get adjudicated. We kind of hit the high profile ones, the murders and things like that.
Well, I would argue with you that if a politician's doing some corrupt stuff or whatever, you're going to report on it right away.
Probably going to be on it. But what if we're doing a different type of journalism? What if we're doing a type of journalism where we're looking at the disparate ways that people of different races or different genders are treated by the courts? And obviously a part of that story is going to be, well, maybe a person of a certain economic class or of a certain gender or of a certain race those charges are being dismissed, whereas the people who have a are you know what I mean? Part of that story is the charges that are dismissed. How do I go back and look at those cases of those dismissed charges and tell that story if those records are sealed?
Yeah, no, I get that. You can probably still just do it with the ones that are charged out and just looking at the severity of how they've been charged versus, what they've actually got, how the people of color charged at with this and, people who are not of color charged with this and how much time and disparity between those.
But it might not be. So for instance, going back to Ferguson, we'll all remember the big protests in Ferguson. And at the center of that, as the Department of Justice came back after the fact and looked at, was that the Black community there was being targeted by law enforcement with very minor, like traffic violations, jaywalking, very, very minor things that newspapers aren't going to cover. We don't often do a news story when somebody gets a speeding ticket or a parking ticket, but they were being harassed. I don't know how you tell the story if all those cases where we could go back and say, well, okay, the white people, if it was a misdemeanor charge against a white person, that was dismissed. But if it was a misdemeanor charge against a Black person, that person ended up with a fine. I think it becomes very difficult to tell that story if we can't see the records for the cases that were dismissed. And,
Yeah.
and I should say, because the North Dakota law does allow the judiciary to, you can petition the judge to unseal a record. But then the problem is you're petitioning the judge to unseal hundreds of records, and you're relying on the government's forbearance to actually reveal a record that might redound to reporting that doesn't make them look very good.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, Rob. It's what I'm saying. In the defense of the economic impact on the community, the barriers that exist with these records for people who are not, elected officials, or just the disparity of of the things that you're talking about. I don't think are anywhere near the numbers close to making this available for everyone. Like I'm talking one and for because you can just dig into prison records and charge records and see that there's a disparity happening, right? You don't have to have access to sealed records or whatever to figure this out. Native Americans account for 5 to 8% of the population, but they account for 25% of the prison population. It's happening. We don't have to do research. We can just look at the prisons.
But I think that's wrong. I think you can't just look at outcomes. I think you have to go upstream from that and look at why are the outcomes happening. I think one thing that is true is that there is more crime committed sometimes in neighborhoods of predominantly a certain of people of color. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they get oppressed. I think a lot of that has to do with they get more police attention. I think a lot of that has to do with there are disparate outcomes for similar charges in the court system. But I don't know how you could get at those. You can look at the effect, but what good is looking at the effect if we don't know the cause?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go up the river. I mean, it's that whole, you don't have to do it when they're adults. You can do it when they're juveniles, Rob. Right. You can look at the numbers of the kids that are locked up right now.
Sure.
And how many are going through the foster care system. It literally blows my mind how many kids we have in foster care in North Dakota.
But when I want to tell them, and I will let Chad ask the question, but Adam and I are having a good back and forth. And I'm really enjoying this. I don't know. I think you can make a powerful case if you say this person who happens to be a Native American or Hispanic or Black, they were treated this way by the criminal justice system. But this person who is rich or white or what have you, was treated this way. The only way to do that is be able to look at those records for the charges that were dismissed.
Or bail.
Maybe.
So Adam, I'm going to pull back big picture and then drill a little deeper. So I think, first of all, I'm not sure everybody listening here knows what F5 Project is. And I think it's obviously a story that is remarkable, what you've been able to do. But then can you connect the work that you're doing at F5, tell the story of F5 to what this law means for individual folks that you're working with and what it means for their lives. I think that's try to put sort of a personal face on this scenario.
Yeah. So F5 started 2016, just going into jails, trying to be helpful. The demand for the support for people coming out of jails and prisons was very high. And so we started providing reentry support by transitional housing. We have houses in Minot and Bismarck, Grand Forks, and Fargo where people coming out of prison live with us. And then we help them secure employment and their own housing and help them get into recovery. And we do that in 9 different offices across the state of North Dakota.
So what would this law mean for, like, I mean, is it mostly employment related in terms of the folks you work with that'll be beneficial to them?
Well, it's like multifaceted. So it's like, it's, in my opinion, just you should not have any kind of record unless you're guilty, right? And so I think court records is just a sly way to just create more oppression for people by creating data that's going to be used against them when they apply for jobs or apply for housing. Even though you haven't been convicted, when they do a housing application and do a background check or a court search and see that you might have been guilty for a felony or whatever, they're going to be apprehensive of renting to you. So that's mine. And then the other aspect is those who have been pardoned, that the actual paperwork says pardon, removal of guilt. And when you go and do a record search on someone who's been pardoned, all the information's still there. So there's really no point to the pardon other than it's just a piece of paper that maybe a icebreaker conversation with an employer or a housing person or whatever, but there's no removal of guilt. So if anything, I'm just holding the state of North Dakota accountable to the words that they use.
Yeah. I struggle with the pardon thing because sometimes we pardon people who did it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, technically they all did it.
right.
Yeah.
And now we don't have the record anymore of what they did, even though, I mean, it's nice that they're pardoned and they get out of jail. And I think a lot of them are eminently defensible. I think in recent years, we have seen some political pardons that are not okay. And
Yeah.
I don't know that I like the idea of sealing those records at all.
Yeah.
And again, the hard part here is I think, Adam, both you and I see merit in each other's arguments. And I think it's just a question of which part of this we're prioritizing. You doing the work that you do and having the background that you do are obviously going to prioritize something different than me, who's a nosy damn journalist and wants to see all the records. But I look at when you say that court records are just a way to sort of create a record that can still be used against people. That's fair, but it also creates a record of one of the most, if not the most awesome power that our government has, which is to literally take people's liberty and lives away from them. And justice is a double-edged sword. Sometimes it means putting somebody away in jail. Sometimes it means setting them free. But justice can be perverted both ways. We can put people in jail who don't belong there. We can also acquit people or dismiss charges against people who should have been convicted. Let me ask you this though: do you support any effort to go even further upstream and like seal arrest records in cases that didn't result in a conviction?
Honestly, Rob, if I had it my way, North Dakota is not ready. So if something's expunged, if something's pardoned, if something's dismissed or whatever, I think it should be wiped across the board.
So Adam, you said North Dakota's not ready for that. So how are we doing in North Dakota? I mean, obviously, this governor has appointed Jonathan Holst to a cabinet level position on recovery and in reentry. I feel like we're making progress, but that's somebody who doesn't live this stuff every day. Are we making progress in the state? Is it fast enough?
I think that like North Dakota is kind of unique because we're small enough to where when we do have a bill like 1166 or we create some new reentry pathways or whatever, we're like a small enough ship that we can pivot together, right? And so from that aspect, like all the reentry bills that are coming through, the record seal bill, like we're like leading edge, bleeding edge for a lot of the stuff that we're doing. Like the free through recovery, platform where we're like doing reentry support coming out of prison. It's lit. I'm at a corrections conference talking about it, and no one has ever heard of anything like this in any state. That program could be templated into, you know, across the nation for corrections and human services and, providing lived experience peer supports on the street, and creating communities and stuff. But on the other end, I go to Michigan or I go to Arizona or I go wherever, and they're dumping insane amount of money into the prisons and creating like auto workshops, like better than what they have at mechanic shops, right? Or they're creating culinary schools where they have a full-on kitchen with like, chef coming in and teaching curriculum or whatever. So I just think that, we're doing a really good job with like getting people into treatments and doing hard skills, a little bit, but we could do a lot better. So we're doing really good on the reentry aspect. I think we could do a lot better on the hard skill aspect.
Do you think saying that we're not ready? I mean, again, obviously, I'm making the same argument over and over here again because I want these records to be out there, and again, I worry about if somebody gets arrested and doesn't get charged, and we want to answer the question why they weren't charged, and maybe the reason why they weren't charged isn't a good reason. I don't know how we tell that story, and I don't know how we hold police and other people accountable if we can't get at those records. And I mean, again, if you want to criticize the judiciary for being unfair to certain types of defendants, in some ways, you're going to have to get records that can only be approved for release by the judiciary. I'm really struggling with this. I wish there was a different way. And I wonder, maybe this question for you, because it seems like the problem we're trying to solve is a societal one, which is where there are attitudes in society where if you've been charged with a crime, then you're guilty. Or for instance, I have a column up today about law enforcement, and it's about it was a survey taken in the Fargo Police Department where a lot of the officers say that they don't feel comfortable admitting that they're having mental health struggles, and they wouldn't feel comfortable going to their colleagues about it. They don't feel comfortable going to their supervisors about it. And my argument is that this warrior cop ethos that they've created in law enforcement, where they have to be these unemotional sentinels and not just human being citizens doing a tough job, has contributed to that. And immediately the reaction from some quarters is that that's anti-cop, right? That's part of, and so if you criticize law enforcement of the courts, you're anti-law and order, you're anti-cop. And if you we already have to overcome that. Or if you're a criminal defendant, then you're guilty because you got arrested, so you must have done something wrong. I mean, it seems to me that the solution here isn't to restrict access to the data, but to change hearts and minds. And I realize what I'm asking, because changing hearts and minds is tough. But I feel like we're treating a symptom of the problem and not the problem.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to how the society reacts to the data, right? And it's like, our society is literal. The public court system, or I mean the people's court, right? Like the social courts, is more punitive than our nation. They're too emotional. Something, if somebody gets charged with, here's a great example. Cassie Black Elk, right? Or Cassandra Black Elk out of Bismarck was charged with child neglect for killing her baby, right? Mugshot all over it. Social feeds, comments, some of the most hated stuff I've ever seen in comments on all the news outlets, and it was everybody was posting about it. It was clickbait if I've ever seen it in my life. She goes to prison. While she's in prison, I meet with her with the Innocence Project. She comes. I didn't even meet with her. I didn't know anything about her. She comes up to me and she says, "I'm not supposed to be here." This is in our prison system, New England. And I was like, "Well, tell me what happened." And she said, "The autopsy report came out after I went to prison." And I was like, "What? That's not that you're making that up, right? There's no way you're in prison before an autopsy report comes out." And it was true. And ineffective defense, like her public defender just literally just did whatever the prosecutors wanted to do. She was forced to say that she did things that she didn't do or whatever in the interrogation rooms. There's tons of, in my opinion, corruption, right? And Innocence Project gets involved. They take it to court and they bring up all this stuff, and she gets vindicated. She gets exonerated because it was true. The autopsy report that the baby died of SIDS. She was told that she killed the baby, fell asleep on the baby, whatever. I don't know, all the details. And so she went to prison not only because for something she didn't do, but she also had to deal with the trauma of believing that she probably killed her baby. And then had to deal with all the social media stuff. So now that's on her record. Child neglect and death of a baby, even though it's been thrown out or whatever, it still shows up on her record. The mugshots are still out there. So my argument is that the collateral consequences to people like Cassandra are far more greater than some political hack who might have bought some property when he shouldn't have.
Yeah, but it's not just that. And let me say this. I am complete sympathy. I don't understand why, as journalists, we are not interested in stories about the government abusing their law enforcement or prosecutorial power in these cases. We tend to treat them when there's an acquittal, whether it's on appeal or a dismissal. We tend to treat it like somebody got away with something. Not maybe these charges shouldn't have been brought in the first place. Maybe it shouldn't have gone this far. In fact, I wrote in the Nicole Rice trial, which was out of Minot, was tried in Grand Forks. The first story I did after that not guilty verdict came in is I took a look at the Ward County State's Attorney's Office record of successful prosecutions. It is horrendous, and they frequently have cases. And a matter of fact, there was a case where a young woman who was operating an in-home daycare was accused of pushing a child down the stairs and harming this child because she was angry or something. The case was ultimately tossed, which is as it should be. The reason why it was tossed is because it was a Brady issue where the prosecutor withheld exculpatory evidence, which was that one of the other children at the daycare pushed the child down the stairs. They withheld that exculpatory evidence. But for some reason, the headline of the Minot Daily News over a mugshot of the defendant was that she was convicted of some minor misdemeanors because she didn't have electrical covers on the outlets in her home or something, which is obviously very small and would unlikely have ever redounded to a criminal charge in any other context. But that was the victory, was that they salvaged a misdemeanor conviction, but the felony got tossed because they withheld evidence. That's the story. Right. And those are the stories that should be told. And so it's frustrating. But I feel like this law hamstrings our ability for the news media and the public to bring accountability to a criminal justice system that I think we all want to be accountable. But I understand your arguments, Adam.
Yeah, so we can agree on what you just said, that if reporters did a better job, we wouldn't have to worry about laws like this.
I don't think our hands are clean. I don't use mugshots anymore in my reporting. That's really all I can control. I'll take that back. I will use them after they've been convicted. Like, I don't have a problem running Ray Holmberg's mugshot anywhere.
Yeah. On that note, Rob, I was a huge advocate of abolishing mugshots and only using it as wanted posters and blah, blah, blah. And then just like the debate that we're having today, there's always exceptions or something that will lead you to be like, I guess that is a mom came up to me and said, that she was grateful for the work that I was doing, blah, 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 and that she was really grateful that, her son was alive, and she didn't know that he was alive until she saw his mugshot.
Wow.
So, yeah, so then I was like, "Man, half the people don't even know if their kids are alive until they see a mugshot or a booking photo or something like that." I'm still against them, but that was the one argument where I was like, "Maybe."
It's a struggle, and there's nothing easy about any of this. And again, a lot of it is driven by societal societal attitudes that are hard to change, that none of us can change. Even if the news media wanted to, even if we went to a completely different philosophy, we're not the gatekeepers anymore. There's people over the internet. Anybody with a Facebook account can publish a mugshot or anything. It's a difficult world to be in. Adam, I think this is a very productive conversation. I'm glad you came on. I'm glad we had the debate.
Yeah, I'm glad you had me, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Adam.
Hey, Plain Talk listeners, have something to say? Call or text Plain Talk with your questions, comments, or headlines you want us to cover.
Just dial 701-587-3141. Leave us your message or shoot us a text with your name and location, and you could be featured on an upcoming show.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I am in Jamestown.
Hey, Rob and Chad. My name's Tony. I live in Grand Forks.
That's 701-587-3141.
Call us, text us, vent, praise.
We want you in the conversation. Thanks for being part of the show.
Now let's get back to today's episode.
Welcome back. Sometimes I guess you could say that it's a frustrating conversation. I think too many people go into politics thinking that the objective is just to win every debate and to win people over. I don't think Adam and I are ever going to agree on this one little area of public policy. And I think both of us are coming to it in good faith. Both of us, I think, have objectives, I think, that are very important. It's just his priorities are different than mine. For now, his preferred outcome is the law. I am worried that long-term, that is going to be a trend, especially when he's not necessarily ruling out down the road, even cutting off things like arrest records or incident reports that don't result in a criminal charge. That worries me, Chad. Yeah. I think that would I think cutting off the court records, I think already significantly hamstrings our ability to do the sort of journalism that holds the courts and law enforcement accountable. And I worry that it's going to set the stage to go further.
So, Rob, I think that interview is the quietest I've ever been during an interview. And I think part of the reason you and I texted about it this morning, I think you and Adam both have really good perspectives on this. I don't have an opinion on it. I was trying to figure out during that conversation what my opinion is. I still don't know how I feel about it from either of your point of views. What I did enjoy about it, though, is you and Adam agree on most of the stuff related to recovery and reentry and all that stuff. And this is just one piece where it's complicated, right? And I think that's what makes policymaking so difficult is there are these, we're trying to do this good thing for people, but then there's these unintended consequences over here. And sometimes we have to fix bills and that kind of stuff. And it's never going to be perfect. It's why we meet as a legislative body every 2 years, because if we get all of the bills right, we don't have to, the legislature doesn't have to come back. Right. And so I think this is noble goals on both of your behalfs and, trying to figure out how to get there. But I mean, it should come as no surprise. And you pointed this out. Based on your backgrounds, of course you're not going to be at the exact same spot on this because you have very different perspectives on it.
Well, different roles to play in the process. And I can't defend. I mean, I would like to think that every journalist is scrupulous and is thinking really hard and trying to balance these things. But let's be honest, a lot of them are going for clicks. A lot of them just want to say they're just thinking about the moment. What can I put out today that'll get clicks? And we'll worry about down the road later. And also we're competing with the internet in forums like Reddit and Facebook and stuff that people just don't care about that kind of thing. And they're not going to think about it long term because it's just everything's in the moment. So this gets really hard. Another thing that I really struggle with is, we argued about it a lot when we were talking about like the Title IX proceedings on campuses where all of a sudden you had like non-judicial, non-legal people adjudicating instances of sexual assault for the purposes of determining whether somebody's going to be disciplined on campus or potentially expelled. One of the things that came up was the right to accuse. It's in the Constitution. You have a right to confront the witnesses against you. But in that context, or even a criminal justice context, there's a lot of people say, well, we shouldn't have to put a rape accuser on the stand because it re-traumatizes them. And the thing is, you're right. That is probably a very traumatic experience for somebody who's actually been raped. And most of the people who make that accusation have actually been raped. Problem is, sometimes they lie. Sometimes some people lie. And how do we ensure just outcomes if you can't rebut the accusations being made against you?
Yeah.
There's no easy answers to any of this stuff.
There's no easy answers. I really not enjoyed, but I thought it was thought-provoking, Adam's conversation and story about Cassandra Black Elk. And so you've got a young woman who was traumatized 3 or 4 different times throughout this process of just a terrible situation that happened to her baby. And now what happens to her, right? I mean, what happens to the, so she's been removed from prison because she didn't do what they said she did, but she was convicted time and time again in the court of public opinion. What happens to her now when she tries to get jobs or all kinds of different things? And I do worry a little bit about that is, something terrible could happen to any of us, right? And we're wrongly accused of something. And then what?
Wrong place, wrong time. People who don't like you are working the levers of power. I mean,
right.
We know these things happen. We know people get falsely accused. Sometimes it's honest mistakes. Sometimes it's corruption. And there's no.
So I also liked your sort of reflection on the media in the story about the daycare provider in Mina, because it's just a perfect example of, I hadn't thought about the fact that when somebody gets found not guilty, it's hardly ever where the public says, well, they didn't do it. Instead, the public is saying, well, the lawyers did something but it often is because, I'm not going to go after your industry too much, but having somebody found not guilty of something isn't nearly as exciting as somebody being found guilty, even if it is just not having covers over the electrical outlets when there's a kid that died in the house, right? I mean, there's just so much.
But the thing is I think you could make it, not exciting is the wrong word.
Yeah.
And the goal here is not titillation. The goal is
clicks. That's the problem, right? I mean, what is the goal?
But I think you could tell a compelling story that would get a lot of the public's attention. My story after the Nicole Rice trial about the Ward County prosecutor's office, state's attorney's office, and their struggles to get convictions got a ton of attention. And I think that was the right story to do. Like, if you're upset about this, let's look at the track record of the prosecutor. Let's look how they handled this case.
Right.
Maybe you continue to think that Nicole Rice, but by the way, Nicole Rice is a perfect example. She's living in Minot now. And there's been some other reports about, her and her husband and some money and I don't really know a lot about that. I don't want to weigh in on that. But I think about people like that who were acquitted or had charges dismissed against them in high profile crime, how they live.
Yep.
Do you have to move? I'm surprised Nicole Rice hasn't. I'm not saying that she should move or should have to move. I think I would have moved. How do you continue to live in this community where people know you and know what your involvement was and are probably going to react in all the ways that unfortunately we could come to expect them to react?
Another example is, I don't know if you remember, like 10 years ago, the West Fargo teacher who was the state teacher of the year was accused of doing inappropriate things with a student, and he fought it and he won. He was found not guilty, but forever he's that teacher, right? If you Google him to this day,
pictures of him standing at the defense table in court.
Exactly right. And he's still teaching, and he obviously was teacher of the year, was a great teacher, is a great teacher. But his career, his life was dramatically changed, and he was found not guilty.
I think this was, all the things that we're talking about is why my position on this is that we have to have the maximum amount of information in the public record. I have a theory about information vacuums. I think it happens a lot with law enforcement when they sit on things like, oh, that's under investigation and we can't say anything. Well, the problem is that leaves a space that people can fill with whatever they want, whether it's pro law enforcement, anti-law enforcement, whatever. In the absence of a record, we tend to just make things up. That's human nature. I don't know how to combat that. And that's why I would rather have these things out in the open, and I mean, talking especially like going back and trying to talk about disparate outcomes in court cases. I mean, you can't just look at the end, the outcome, and say, well, because it's this outcome, it must be unjust. I think it's more complicated than that. I think we have to look upstream and say, well, why were they treated differently in the courts? I mean, you could say, well, because there's a disparate number in jail, they must have been, but without looking at the actual records, how can you conclude that? And how can you conclude that there's been disparate treatment if you can't look at the records of the people who got away with it?
Right.
Or not got away with it. That's the wrong way to put it. People who weren't convicted.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that the fact we're having this conversation, the fact that Jonathan Holt has his job that he has, the fact that Adam Martin is doing this work, the fact that Adam Martin just told us we're on the, not just the cutting edge, the bleeding edge on how we're doing reentry.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, North Dakota, you don't think of like ultra red conservative states as being the place that is the best for people trying to come back into society out of prison. It's something we should be really proud of, that we're able to even have these conversations here.
And I don't know why that is, but that's not a recent phenomenon either. If you look at, for instance, restoring voting rights for people who get out of jail, North Dakota has always had a far more progressive policy towards that than, say, Minnesota, which is typically seen as a lot bluer,
right?
Or is a blue state, overall. North Dakota has long had a far more progressive. So I don't know if there's something specific to our culture. I don't know what it is. We tend to punt. We tend to take positions on criminal justice matters that maybe you wouldn't expect from.
Far more forgiving than you would guess in the political environment. It's a good thing because, again, these folks coming out are living in our neighborhoods, and like this is a really good thing for a society.
Well, there is a brand of conservatism, obviously one that is not in vogue right now, that really believes in limited government and is skeptical of all exercises of government power, including in the criminal justice system. Right. So there is a tradition of conservatism that's not very popular right now that is skeptical of police power and doesn't want to just back the blue in any circumstance. I can 100% support law enforcement. I'm completely baffled today as I'm reading some of the Facebook comments about my column about law enforcement. I'm talking about like 75% of the Fargo Police Department says they feel uncomfortable telling a superior that they're struggling with a mental health issue. That is a terrible thing for those officers. And you can't tell me that the community of Fargo is served well by officers who don't feel safe being vulnerable, who don't feel safe being honest about what they're struggling with. Because I don't think that necessarily is a bad thing. They're human beings.
Yeah, do we really want police officers who are struggling with mental health issues just to ignore the problem and be out on the streets?
I want them on a human level. I want them to be healthy. I want them to get the help they need so that they can be healthy and happy, and then also be better public servants.
Right.
I think I'm right that my argument is the warrior cop where we're kidding the officers out like they're patrolling Fallujah and not Fargo, I think is part of the problem. Like this sort of toxic, tough guy. I say tough guy. Obviously, there's plenty of women, wonderful,
plenty of tough women too.
Tough women too. Tough guy, tough gal mentality. I think that contributes to the idea that they can't just say, "Listen, I'm struggling. I'm really having a hard time. I'm afraid I'm losing my temper," or whatever it is that I'm depressed. Whatever it is that they're struggling with. They should feel like they can talk about that. And the fact that they can't is a cultural problem. But you bring it up and now you're anti-cop.
Right. No, I think that's exactly right. And it's something as a society we're not even that good at, let alone when you get to those sort of very masculine, traditional law enforcement, emergency services, those kind of things. It doesn't surprise me that that profession maybe is a little bit slower on the uptick of taking care of one's personal mental health.
For
But
sure.
we have to do better.
We do. What else do we want to talk about? You want to talk a little bit about food stamps? Our good friend Earl Pomeroy has said it's woke to call it SNAP.
Yeah, that is so funny. Like, I mean, it is sort of. He's not wrong. We got rid of food stamps because it, ostracized, put a stamp on
He
certain
kind of
people.
pigeonholed a problem there. I think I talked about the Mark Marone. They were progressives have annoyed kids in the fact of them. It's stuff like that. And it's stupid. Like, we shouldn't care that it's SNAP, it's food stamps, whatever. But it is annoying. Every time I hear a liberal talk about the unhoused, I am annoyed.
So
Right?
I use
It's
that
okay to
term
call them
sometimes
homeless.
now.
They don't have homes. It's a terrible thing. I want to have serious conversations about it. Don't come at me because I said homeless.
Yeah. So I just, again, Earl's reflexive sort of annoyance with me calling it SNAP cracks me up. And then I just did go watch the Mark Maron special where he talks about, thanks a lot, liberals, for annoying people, annoying us into fascism. It's relatable.
Stop being so annoying.
Yeah.
But so the thing, and this kind of plays into that. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who I think is a charismatic fool and is working for an administration that I think is authoritarian. I don't need to go on a diatribe about how much I dislike the Trump administration. I feel like that's well established in the record. And that being said, I don't think they're wrong about saying that SNAP benefits shouldn't go to candy bars and sodas. I don't think that that's wrong. And I wrote a column about it. I think North Dakota, the federal government, the Trump administration is issuing waivers to states like North Dakota where they can restrict some of these things. And North Dakota hasn't done it. I think there's like a dozen states that have, mostly red states. I think all red states, maybe. I think North Dakota should do it. And I think we should do it. Maybe it's just a cultural thing. And again, I think it's just one of those annoyance things. I walked into a gas station years ago and saw one of those milkshake machines, and underneath it said EBT eligible. And it ticked me off. Like, that's not why we have the SNAP program, so that people can get gas station milkshakes. I want them buying chicken breasts and produce and stuff at the grocery store, which, by the way, they're going to get a better bang for their buck. I had somebody telling me that, it's so expensive to buy healthy food. I don't know. It's $4 for a can of Monster Energy drink, and you could get a crate of tomatoes for that. So give me a break.
So I struggle a little bit with this one, Rob.
Okay.
And maybe it's part of my liberal annoying people sort of thing, but
You're about to be very annoying.
I might be a little annoying, right? Because I think that there also is the bit of dignity with a food stamps recipient sometimes being able to get a candy bar, right? Like, I'm not saying, like, I don't know how to do this. Do I think that people on food stamps should be buying more produce and whatever? But some of it's also efficiency. Sometimes they don't have time to cook or don't have the skills to cook or whatever. And you can't just buy chicken breasts and right. And it's easier to run through McDonald's. So
that is actually one thing, like the current law is that you can't go in and buy a pre-cooked rotisserie chicken. Like, you can't buy food that you can eat at the point of sale if it's
that's
hot.
stupid.
Just stupid and weird. Like, if you want to go in and buy a rotisserie chicken for your family to eat, I don't have a problem with that.
So you can buy a Monster Energy drink, but you can't buy a rotisserie chicken?
Yes.
Okay. So we have to fix some of those things because honestly, rotisserie chickens, I don't know about your family, but sometimes when we don't have time to cook a bunch, we'll get a rotisserie chicken, throw something together really quick at home.
Yeah. You can eat it that way. You can make sandwiches. I mean,
yeah. So I struggle a little bit with this, with the idea that just because a family doesn't make much money, that little Johnny never gets a candy bar. Yeah. But I understand your overall point. I don't drink any Monster drinks because I'm convinced they're going to make all of our hearts explode at some point.
I had one time, and I did feel like my heart was exploding.
Yeah, I don't like them at all.
And
I'm a guy who drinks coffee 24/7, and that's too much for me.
Yeah, Coke Zeros for me, way too many. But I think the argument, it's like, well, you just want to, somebody told me, it's like, we just want to be cruel to poor people and tell them they can't buy candy bars. That's not my argument. First of all, SNAP is a supplemental program.
Sure.
It's not anybody's total income. I'm not calling for a law saying, well, if you're below a certain income level, you can't buy a candy bar. If you have, I mean, these people have jobs in addition to collecting SNAP a lot of the time, or they have maybe other government program. Maybe they're on SSI, they're TANF, whatever. And if they want to use some of those funds to buy their kid a Snickers bar or something through the checkout, that's not the problem. But to me, SNAP is like a safety net. It's like, we're going to set the absolute minimum where you're not going to starve to death, right? We're going to, your economic hardships, whatever's going on in your life that you need this program, we're going to make sure you get fed. But in doing that, candy bar is a luxury. Candy bar is not feeding you. That's not nutritious. You're not going to live on candy bars. You shouldn't live on you wouldn't live very long on candy bars and energy drinks. So we need to limit it to, again, and again, I don't have a problem if it's frozen dinners. I don't have a problem if it's, whatever, a rotisserie chicken or a pint of pasta salad or something from the deli counter, whatever it is. I'm not here to micromanage those decisions, but I think energy drinks is just or gas station milkshakes. I think, first of all, it's not an efficient way to feed yourself. It's so expensive.
But this is the problem. Where do you find that line, right? I mean, I'm guessing that pint of pasta salad isn't the healthiest option you've ever had in your life. It's delicious, and I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't buy it, but where is that line, right? And
it's
the other
more
thing,
nutritious than a Monster energy drink.
Sure. I think we can all say no energy drinks. I think we can all be sort of no energy drinks. The other thing, I think this is one of those things where this isn't out in the grand scheme of federal spending. Is Monster energy drinks that big of a thing? Is this one of the things where conservatives are sort of focused in on those damn poor people? They're drinking Monster energy drinks while such and such business is getting subsidy, while Elon Musk is getting hundreds of millions of dollars of subsidies that go into his pocket. I mean, is there some of that going on?
Maybe. But is there also like liberals picking a hill to die on that's like an 80-20 issue where like most of the public is against
No, I think there's probably some.
I mean, to me, that was kind of like, hey, Democrats, here's a way where you can, this is a layup. Right? Monster energy drinks. Let's not, those don't need to be covered by SNAP. Gas station.
Did you stop picking on Monster? Can it be all energy drinks?
Rockstar energy drinks.
I couldn't come up with any other names of energy drinks, but no, I do think this is an interesting conversation, and we also need to train people better in our schools about healthy choices and all those kind of things, because I think there's a lot of parents who are now are you rolling your eyes? Did you just roll your eyes at me?
A little bit. A little bit. I don't know how much education we need to do that some of the candy bars are not the healthiest way.
Right. But I also think I think fast food has become so much. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, we never had fast food. It'd be like once a month we'd go to Hardee's. It was the biggest deal ever. I think it's more accessible to people now than it has been in the past. And I'm more concerned about McDonald's than I am about a candy bar at the gas station, if I'm being honest.
Also having like fast food delivered.
Yep, for sure.
Holy cow. We did it once where we had come home and we had a bunch of unexpected guests. I had no food ready to feed these people. And I just thought, we'll try out DoorDash and we'll have a bunch of tacos delivered. And truly shocking amount of money spent later. I should have looked closer at what I was buying, but I was in a hurry and I didn't. People who I'm watching who I really has no business having their food delivered by taxi, ordering cheap, spending lofty prices for
$15 for the delivery fee for number 4 at McDonald's.
Right. It's I mean, you're paying more for the delivery than for the food. I mean, again, I'm not really into judging people's choices, but there comes a point where if you're going to ask the taxpayers to cover your grocery bill, There's going to be some limits on it. And I think some of the existing limits are stupid. If you want to, my grocery store actually does they do a lot of kind of pre-prepared meals. Very convenient, fairly cost effective, time saving. You're paying a little more because they're preparing it, but it's also time effective too. I'm sympathetic to that. I don't think we should.
Hold on. Can you use food stamps to buy grocery store sushi?
Yes, I don't know.
That's the question of the day.
It's cold. It's literally in the policy that if it's hot, you can't do it. So sushi's cold. Maybe you can. I'm
gonna tell the listeners here. Grocery store sushi. I like it. I'm a big fan.
I like sushi. I have seen sushi available in my gas stations.
Yeah, gas station might be too far.
When I'm like doing a cost benefit analysis of sushi is delicious, but the gastrointestinal distress that this sushi may cause later.
I'm telling you, the gas stations that either
have the same cost benefit analysis with Taco Bell, by the way.
Yeah, but the grocery stores that have a chef on board or on staff, or it's delivered from a place locally that you're aware of, buy that sushi. Great price, good stuff.
Oh, yeah. Sushi's great. We actually have a great place in my Oishi. They do ramen. The Oishi ramen's what's called, but they have a sushi bar as well. Fantastic.
I will tell you, my favorite place currently is Ichiban, which is in the former Woodhouse on State Street. And the inside still looks a lot like the old Woodhouse. And so it's like you're in there. You can still sort of smell the cheap burgers in the place, eating sushi and ramen. I love it.
I was just reading an article from a food critic who said some of the best food he had was from a dumpy Cambodian place with a menu that had been printed about 30 years ago that you could barely read. Nothing's in English, but it was the best food he'd ever had in his life. Stuff like that.
But there's some free advertising for a sushi ramen place in Minot and Ichiban right here in beautiful Bismarck.
Yeah, that's right. We went way off topic there. The other thing we want to talk about, the $740,000 question. Our producer Matt Fern's podcast has now been completed. I actually have a column. By the time you listen to this, but the column should be published, kind of wrapping up why it's important. We've advocated for this. It's on all our feeds. It's not just because we really like Matt and he does a great job for us. But I think it's an important story. The film grant story in and of itself, I think, is interesting and disappointing in a lot of ways. Not Matt's ability to tell it, but certainly the outcomes from it. But I think also the way he went about telling it. This is a form of journalism we don't see in North Dakota very much. His use of primary sources, audio from committee hearings, records that he requested and accessed. I'm certainly familiar with a lot of that, but our ability, I think, really illustrates how important it is to keep access to that information open. What a game changer it's been to put cameras in the committee rooms, in the legislative chambers. And also, you can use the grant story as kind of a tale as old as time, right? This is how the sausage gets made sometimes, and it's not pretty. And the sausage is kind of rancid at the end.
And a couple of my biggest takeaways is one, we had Drew Wrigley on a previous episode talking about the Ethics Commission and sort of made the case, just call our office and we'll tell you what's going on. That is not the experience that Matt had with a lot of state agencies trying to find information out about this grant, right? It's very easy for statewide elected officials or cabinet level folks to just say, call my office and everything will be fine. That's not often the case of a citizen going through. But as I said in a previous episode, I think one of the things that is my biggest takeaway is there's going to be a lot of people who listen to the legislative process and say, yeah, this is the way this works. Of course, this is the way this works. And I would make the case that is, but it's not the way it should work. And thank God we have transparency in committee rooms right now, because I think we're hearing a lot more than we used to hear. Because there's audio and video in these committee rooms,
and it's going to change the way they behave. Hey, do we have time? We had a voicemail, Tony from Grand Forks. Matt, do you have that queued up? Is that something we could play?
Hey, Rob and Chad. My name's Tony Hollingsworth, and I live in Grand Forks. I just finished listening to your interview with Senator Hoeven. I keep hearing his argument over and over that due process, quote, doesn't apply to somebody who is here illegally. It's the stupidest argument, both hypothetically and constitutionally. Throughout the Constitution, there are references to either citizens or persons, and there's been a clear difference between them throughout history. The 5th and 14th Amendments both protect the right of persons to due process. It doesn't say citizens, it says persons. To quote them, quote, "No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law." And I like how you guys played out the hypothetical of a country where due process isn't guaranteed to everyone. Because how do you prove you're here legally without due process? Let's say ICE walks up to you, says you're a gang member and here illegally, at which point they shove you into an unmarked van, like they did with that Tufts University student, and then take you to a detention center without seeing a judge. How do you prove ICE is lying or mistaken? You can't without due process. I think if rights can be taken from one group, then no one has rights. Some of us just have conditional privileges.
Yeah, I think that, by the way, I feel like this kind of relates to our discussion with Adam Martin about closing down like arrest records. Well, what if it's an ICE arrest record? And what if it never went to court because, the government decided, the administration that's currently in power decided they decided unilaterally you're not a citizen and you didn't get a day in court. And now you're in El Salvador in a prison all of a sudden. And now what? I really struggled with this idea that rights are only for citizens. In some cases, that's true, as Tony points out. In other cases, it's not true. And obviously, one of the places it has to be true, unless we're going to set up a completely absurd catch-22 situation, is, if the accusation against you is that you're an illegal citizen, you have to have due process in order to prove that you are a legal citizen. Otherwise, what we're giving the government is the power to say that anybody is not a citizen and shove you in a van and ship you out of the country without you getting a right to rebut that anywhere, ever, at all.
So you connected this to the interview earlier with Adam Martin, and I think about the interview that ran earlier this week with Drew Wrigley. We talked about a tweet that he sent out that was all about due process and how the Ethics Commission has to give due process. Well, I think it's connected to this. If we care about due process for state legislators, we should care about due process.
And we should.
Yeah, we should. Yep, absolutely. But then those folks, John Hoeven and Drew Wrigley, need to care about due process for people and human beings on our streets. Because to your point, otherwise, we're giving ICE a hell of a lot of control over us, and I'm not comfortable with that.
And again, for siding with you on this, I'll get accused of being a liberal again. But to me, this is it's not just a conservative thing, but again, conservatives at one point were skeptical of this version of power. It's why, conservatives are so fond of the Constitution and saying it guarantees us these rights to protect us from the government. But in this instance, it's like, well, the government power is being executed against a group of people we don't like very much. Therefore, we're okay with it. But if the Trump administration can use executive branch authority and law enforcement authority in this way, then a future Democratic administration could do the same. I hope they wouldn't, but they could. And is that what we want? Where the president of the United States, through federal law enforcement, could just throw someone in a van and ship them out of the country and never give them a day in court.
Here's the thing, Rob. I don't think this is a conservative value or a liberal value. This is an American value.
It's a small L classical liberal value.
This is something that everybody, regardless of ideology, who's an American should care about. Due process is part of who we are.
Yeah, and it matters. It matters in lots of ways. In fact, I remember having a fight with Heidi Heitkamp over she wanted to use the flight lists, the no-fly lists, and say that those people weren't allowed to own firearms. Well, there's no due process in that. The government could just add you to a list, and now you can be denied a constitutional right. I had a problem with that too. But the problem is, Chad, fundamentally, people only support these arguments when they're in their favor, and then they abandon them when it's convenient. And that has got that is one place where, as American citizens, we have got to be better. You can't abandon this stuff because the person you like is in the White House.
Yeah, citizens need to do better, but also like I keep going back in my brain to the legislative branch, just giving the executive branch all this new authority. That's not the way this is set up. This is not the way.
Not even giving it to them, or just standing with their hands in their pockets while he
right.
Yeah, is really problematic. So, all right, we're gonna put a pin in it there. Thank you as always for listening. Follow us on all the social media feeds: TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, X. We're Plain Talk ND. You can send us a voicemail or a text, 701-587-3141. The $740,000 question, if you haven't listened to it yet, you should. It's on our YouTube channel. It's in our podcast feed, wherever you're subscribed to us, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're on all the platforms. It's in our feed. Please listen to it. Thank you for listening. We'll talk again. That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening. Now, describe for me all the ways in which I am wrong about this.
Oh, take your time on this one, Adam.